there, and thank you so much for joining me here on Homeschool with Brittany. Today we are wrapping up our 5-part series about the steps that you need to take in order to create a home education program for your student. We're going over step 5, and what I wanted to discuss today doesn't have anything to do with your letter of intent or notice of intent that you are going to file in order to officially create your home education program. So it's not about enrollment, it's not about forms, it's not about co-ops, it's not about any of those things. Today we are talking specifically about something that you as a parent are going to need to do to prepare yourself for the journey ahead. And so step number 5 of creating your home education program for your student or students and your family is that you are going to need to develop a thick skin. And hear me out, because I know you're probably like, Brittany, who cares about that? I've enrolled my student, I've thought through curriculum, I've thought through co-ops, we're signed up for all of these different things, we're good to go. This isn't about me, this is about my student. And I am here to tell you that you as a new home education parent are going to need to develop a thick skin, because there are going to be people, some of them very well-intentioned, who are going to question your decision. It may be your spouse or your partner. It may be some of your other kids. It may be neighbors, family members, friends, again, people who are well-meaning that are questioning your decision to pull your student out of a traditional school, or if your kids are younger, to start them off on this journey without them having the experience of being in a traditional school. It may just be strangers, people that you don't even know, people that you just meet along the way, who are going to question your decision. And let me tell you, even though we like to think that it doesn't matter what other people say or what other people think about what we're doing, about the decisions, and the choices that we are making for our kids and our families, sometimes it does get to you, because there is going to be a part of you who is going to question whether or not this is actually the best decision for you to make for your students' education. If you're like me, I come from an education background. I come from a line of educators, and pretty much everyone in my family was involved in some way, shape, or form in the education system as a teacher, administrator, whatever the case may be. I was a teacher myself. So even for me, with that background and knowing how important education it is, or how important education and a quality education is, and how much I value education, coming to the decision to pull my student out of school, traditional school, when she was in the 3rd grade, and homeschool was a really big deal. And there was a part of me that along the way, well, particularly in the beginning, kind of questioned that decision. And it did not help when I had other people sometimes, giving their unsolicited advice and opinions about my decision. That did not help my mental, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today, because whether you like it or not, people are going to feel like, for whatever reason, as soon as you tell them that you want to homeschool your kid, that you're thinking about homeschooling your kid, they're going to think that that is an opportunity for them to give their opinions. You might not ask them for their opinion. You probably don't want their opinion, but they're going to give it to you anyways. And the thing about that is, most of us are used to the concept of a traditional school, traditional education, right? That is pretty much what all of us have done, whether it be a private school, public school, even now with virtual schools. Most of us are used to traditional education. That's what we did. That's what our parents did, grandparents, great-grandparents. If at any point, even if they didn't graduate from college or high school, if at any point they were enrolled in a school, more than likely it was a traditional brick and mortar school. So for them, I kind of think about it in terms of Beauty and the Beast, which is one of my favorite movies. If you think about the scene, the mob scene where Gaston is like gathering all of these people together to go charge the castle, one of the lines that they sing in that song is, "We don't like what we don't understand because it scares us." And I think that people really give their opinions based on that, right? They don't know what home education is. They don't know what it means to homeschool their kids. A lot of people don't know anyone who has been homeschooled. So even just the thought of it, they don't understand it. And because they don't understand it, it must be wrong, right? If I didn't do it for my kids, then it must be a bad idea for you to do it for your kids, right? So a lot of people are coming from that perspective, and it really is just maybe out of fear for you making a bad decision based on the fact that they don't understand it and they don't like what they don't understand. So just kind of think about it in those terms. That's kind of how I look at it, or I've been able to look at it now when it comes to people trying to give their 2 cents about something that I did not ask them to give their 2 cents on. And so my advice to you would be to, until you have a supportive community that is built up around you, to kind of have like some pre-thought out answers to some common FAQs or frequently asked questions, right? So I have a list of questions that I've kind of thought through, things that have been asked of me over the years when people find out that my daughter is homeschooled. And again, we started homeschooling in halfway through third grade, and my daughter is now finishing up her junior year of high school. So we've been doing this for quite some time. And of course, people have questions. So again, my advice would be to try to formulate some answers so that you're prepared to speak on this issue if you choose to do so, right? So you're not obligated to answer anybody's questions, to respond to anybody's concerns or worries about why you choose to homeschool your kids. Like, that's not something that you owe to anybody. However, if you do want to kind of formulate some answers to these questions, I'm going to tell you basically what kind of questions to anticipate. So the first one that I could think of is, why are you homeschooling? Why do you want to homeschool your kids? Like, what's that about? Is traditional school not good enough for you? Is a private school not good enough for you? Is charter school not good enough for your kid? Like, why would you even want to go down the route of homeschooling your kids? Any variation of the question, why are you choosing to homeschool? So the second question that I have here, which I just asked, is, isn't regular school, this is pretty much what you'll hear, or isn't traditional school good enough, right? So they're automatically getting on the defensive and questioning whether your kid is too good for regular school. And again, this is coming from a place of, what, my education wasn't good enough for me, and it's not good enough for your kid. I don't understand it, so I don't like it, right? Going back to that. Another question that I got a lot when we first started out is, how are your kids going to make friends, right? Your kids need to interact with other kids. Kids need to be socialized. Those aren't questions, but those are statements that you will hear. Again, a variation of the question of, how will you socialize, or how will your kid make friends? Because automatically people think that if a kid is homeschooled, that they're lonely, they're alone, that they don't have any friends, that they cannot make friends. I am going to say that you are going to, particularly if you're like me and you are the parent of an only child, you are going to need to be very intentional of how you socialize your kid and make sure that they have those connections, those peer connections that they will need to have. But that is going to be a question that you get from people who are either well-intentioned or just misinformed, is, how will your kid make friends? And that is something that you do want to consider, right? If you are going to be homeschooling, what is your plan for socialization for your student? Because one of the great things about a lot of homeschooled students is they're very good around adults, right? They tend to be very well spoken because they spend a lot of time around their parents, right? Their parents are educating them, and they don't really have the influence of those peers on a daily basis who are speaking in the language that young people speak, right? They're not really doing the things that young people are doing, or their peers are doing. So they're not really aware of that. They're just kind of aware of the things that the adults around them are saying. So they tend to be very well spoken, very come off as very well educated. They do well having conversations with adults, but you do want to make sure that your kid or your student does have access to their peers in some way, shape, or form, which is why step 4 of my 5 steps was joining some type of homeschool co-op at a minimum. Like, it doesn't have to be, well, and I wouldn't even say at a minimum, it doesn't have to be a co-op, but you want them to be involved in something that allows them to be around other kids their age. Another question that you might get is, who's going to teach them? Are you going to teach them? Are you going to be your kid's teacher? And then the second part of that is, don't you need a degree to be a teacher? You don't have a degree. Are you sure you're the best person to educate your kids? So again, some variation of those 2 questions is something that you will get. And I would say, do not take this personally. If someone is questioning your credentials or your ability to teach your kids, it's coming from a place of misinformation, right? So they don't know, again, they don't know what homeschooling is all about, that there's so many different ways that you can choose to homeschool your kid, whether it be a teacher-led program where you are the one who is in fact facilitating instruction. There are so many other things that you can do. If you have not watched the previous curriculum video, choosing a curriculum, which was step 2 in the process, make sure that you go ahead and do that, because I do discuss a lot of those different approaches to home education and to really teaching your student or getting your student to learn. But there's no one way that it needs to happen. And this is going to depend on your state, though, as far as the level of education that you are going to need to have in order to be legally able to homeschool your student. But you don't need, unless it's required by the state, you do not need a college degree to educate your kids. My daughter is in the 11th grade. She is now currently in her 3rd year of high school Chinese. I don't speak Chinese. That is not a reason for me to not homeschool my kid because I don't speak Chinese, or because, she just finished taking a college level math course. I can't teach a college level math course. There are resources out there for her to be able to do that and to do it successfully and to still learn without me having to be the one facilitating that instruction. So please, if you do get this question or this concern from people, don't think that you should now question yourself and your abilities to teach your kid, because if they are in middle school, if they are in high school, the expectation really is not that you're going to be the one teaching them all of these subject areas every single quarter, every single semester of every single year. There are options. Okay. The next question that you might get is, how are you going to find time to teach them? Don't you work? Don't you have other kids? Don't you have other obligations? How are there going to be enough hours in the day for you to teach your kids? What are you thinking? Right? Hopefully you don't get that last part of the question, but that might be a question that you get. Where are you going to find the time to do this? That might be a question that you are legitimately asking yourself. I work, I have other responsibilities, I have other kids that I'm taking care of. How am I going to find the time to fit homeschooling in? Well, let me say this, right? The great thing about homeschooling is that you are not bound by a strict schedule. The caveat to that is there are going to be states that do require that your student attend school for a certain number of hours a day or a certain number of days out of the year. However, unless it's particular to your state, there is not a rule that says that your student must be learning and being in the classroom from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or whatever the case may be, right? One of the things that I found very early on is that my kid did not need, like, the definition of a full school day was no longer 8 to 3 or 7 to 2 for high school students, whatever the case may be. It did not take that long for her to learn what she needed to do to complete her work for the day, because she was not sitting in a classroom with 25, 30 other students vying for that teacher's attention, or waiting for morning announcements, waiting for all of these things to happen, waiting for all the students to arrive to get their materials out, all of that class time that is really wasted. She didn't need that anymore, right? So her school day actually got a lot shorter. At first, I was a little concerned because I was like, wait, I'm used to, as a former classroom teacher, you go to school for, your individual class is like for 50 minutes or for an hour or for whatever the case may be. You need to spend 50 minutes. And I quickly learned that that really is not the case. The great thing about homeschooling is students will work at their own pace. So there are some days where for a particular subject, she can be finished fairly quickly and either move on to another subject or move on to another lesson in that same subject. There are going to be some days where she doesn't work in a particular subject, right? So that's where the flexibility of homeschooling comes in. And that's one of the advantages of homeschooling. But she's not sitting at a desk from 8 to 3 every single day. Does she like structure? Yes. But I can teach her and she can learn whenever in the day that needs to happen. So, my daughter is very studious, a lot more studious than I was when I was her age. Sometimes she likes to work over the weekend. Like, she will wake up on a Saturday and get some schoolwork done, right? She will take a test on a Sunday afternoon. That's what she does, and that's perfectly okay. That counts as instruction. That counts as a school day in my book. You are no longer going to be held to Monday through Friday from this hour to this hour. Okay. So you fit it in when you can fit it in, how you can fit it in, depending on the curriculum that you're using. A school day for you might be going on a field trip to the zoo, going to the library and reading there, going to a play, there are so many different things that you can do as a homeschooling parent to help educate your homeschooled student. And that's all going to count towards instruction, because even though it seems untraditional based on what we're used to as us, as those who have gone to traditional brick and mortar schools, it's just a different type of learning, a different way of learning, and every student learns differently. You have options. Okay. So I know I spent a lot of time talking about that, but it really is true. The question really is not how are you going to find the time? It's just really about how is homeschooling going to fit into your day, into your schedule. Just as a reminder, I am a single mom who has a full-time job, and I have been homeschooling my daughter alone since she was in the 3rd grade. So it can be done. And just know that that should not really be a concern for you as much as you probably think that it is right now today. The next question that you may want to think about having an answer to is, this is one that is pretty pertinent for me right now. Do homeschool kids go to college? Don't you want your kid to go to college? Are they going to be able to go to college if they're homeschooled? Are they going to have the same, all of that, right, is a common question that you will have if you have a homeschooler who is in middle school or who is in high school. And my answer to that is, if you and your kid want your kid or your student to go to college, they can go to college. You just have to be very aware of the process when it comes to, admissions and all of that, but also the requirements for the schools that your students want to go through. So I've mentioned this already in this video, but my daughter is just now, like, literally finishing up her junior year. She has a couple of things that she needs to finish, but she's pretty much done, which means in a couple of months, she's going to start applying to college. And let me just tell you, she's ready, right? She's already taken the SAT. She's already taken the ACT. She did very well on both. Thank goodness. Her grades, she does very well academically. And one of the things that I was very cognizant of when we started this journey, particularly when she got to middle school, was the classes that she would need, the high school level classes that she would need in order to be able to be admitted into most colleges. And in a previous video, I mentioned that we are here in the state of Florida. So when it comes to public universities in Florida, I made sure that the coursework that she took while she was in high school, every single course that she took in high school would be, and even in middle school, because she started taking her high school level courses in middle school, would be like, how would that fit into her college applications and her high school transcript when it came time for her to apply for colleges. And so at this point, she has not only met, but exceeded the minimum requirements for getting into a state school here in Florida. Now, does that guarantee admissions into a state school? Of course not. Right now, college admissions are very competitive. And, but I know that if for whatever reason she does not get into a school, it's not going to be because she was an unprepared homeschooled student, right? So her college application is going to stack up nicely to any public school student who is also applying for the same college. Now, as it relates to private school, I don't know, because I never went to private school, so I can't really tell you how the admission process would work for her if she were at that school or at a private school, and how that compares to, how their preparation compares to public school students. But with my familiarity with the public school systems here in many of the systems here in the state of Florida, I know that she stacks up quite nicely and really does exceed the requirements for admissions. So yes, your homeschooled kid can go to college. Your homeschooled kid can get scholarships, can be very competitive in the admissions process if you, as the parent, really helps to set them up for success from the very beginning. And so one thing that I want you to remember is, as a homeschooled parent, you are not just the parent anymore, right? You are potentially the teacher, but even more importantly, you're the principal, right? You're the administrator of the school. You are the school counselor, right? So you're the one who's going to be guiding them through that process of applying for college. If your student is not going to be attending college, you're the career counselor, right? You're the one who's preparing them for life after high school graduation. So all of that does fall on you, and I want you to be prepared for that before the time comes, because what you don't want to happen is your student gets ready to graduate and they're not prepared for college, they're not prepared for the workforce, you didn't really have a plan, and now you're kind of scrambling to try to figure out what your student is going to do. I don't want you to be in that situation. So yes, to answer that question, your kid can go to college, your kid can be successful in the college or the college admissions process, as long as you are both prepared for that process. The next question that you might kind of get, typically not directly, but kind of like underhandedly, is, what if you mess up? Like, what if things don't go well? What if your kid falls behind, right? So how are you going to handle that is really what the question is. How are you going to handle it if homeschooling your student is not what you thought it was going to be, and it actually was a detriment to their education and not a positive, right? So that is really a loaded question. That may be something, another one of those questions that you as a parent are, kind of asking yourself. And my answer to that question, and again, you can have your own answer, but looking on the other side of it, having homeschooled for quite some time now, my answer to that question is we don't have control, right, over our students' teachers. Every year that they're in a traditional school, they get a new teacher. If they're in secondary school, whether it be middle school or high school, they have a different teacher for every subject. Some teachers are going to be great. Some teachers are going to be duds. Some teachers are going to care for your student and be very involved and very, staying on top of them. Some teachers are not going to do that at all. So, but we don't question that, right? We just send our kids off to school and hope for the best, expect the best out of the system and out of the environment. And we all know that that's not always the case, right? Our kids sometimes end up with, like I said, teachers who are duds, some that are great, but you never really know what you're going to get. And I would say if you have a rough start, if you have a bumpy start with your homeschool journey, that's okay. That's to be expected. The great thing, like I mentioned earlier about homeschooling, is that there is a lot of flexibility, right? So, and it's because you're like really involved in the process, it's going to be a lot easier for you to see if something's not going well, if you need to pivot a little bit, if you need to maybe switch out a textbook or some curriculum. You're going to pick up on that a lot faster than you would if you were entrusting your kid to another teacher, to a school, to an educational system that you don't have as much control over. So there have been many times where, particularly when my daughter was in elementary school and we were using a lot of textbooks and I was doing a lot of the teaching myself, there were many times where like just a couple chapters within a textbook, like into a textbook, we would both be like, yeah, this is not working, right? This is too fill in the blank. This is too, isn't well written. The information, whatever the case was, we were able to figure that out pretty quickly. And we had the flexibility to be able to adapt, to pivot, to do whatever we needed to do, to switch out a book, to switch out a curriculum, and to get back on track. The other great thing about homeschooling is because you're not really tied to a school district's calendar, you have the flexibility to take however, like the amount of time that you need to complete a course. So some students will complete some courses in a short amount of time. Some students will need to take a lot longer to complete a course. It's going to, if it's a year-long course that started in August and was supposed to end in May or June, maybe you have to extend it out through the summer and in order for your student to really just get it. And that's okay. Like there's no hard and fast rule unless your state does have a hard and fast rule that you have to follow. But for the most part, there is no hard and fast rule about how long you need to take in order to complete a course. So if it doesn't take as long as you thought, or it took a little bit longer than you thought to get things done, to fix some mistakes, to get back on track, then that's what it is. And that's perfectly okay. What if you mess up? You probably will mess up. And that's okay because everybody does, right? So when I was a teacher, did I always get it right for every single student? Not at all. I did the best that I could. And as parents, that is what we do. We do the best that we can every single day. And so the last thing that I wanted to go over, the last FAQ that you may want to prepare yourself for is, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to pull your kid out of school and teach them yourself, right? So it's kind of like as if you have not already thought things through, right? So for some reason, some people feel like they need to ask you that question because like if you think that this is something that you want to do, there must be something wrong with you. So I'm going to question you again just to make sure that you are sure that this is something that you want to do. Yes, it is. Right? Again, we're not obligated to answer anyone's question, to prove anything to anybody else, except for the state when it comes to annual evaluations. Other than that, like, I don't have to prove to you that this is something that I want to do. This is something that we are going to do. This is something that we are going to be successful at. This is something, however, that if you want to stop doing it, if you want to terminate your home education program, if your student wants to go back to traditional school, that's going to be an option, right? So you're not like locked into homeschooling for the rest of your student's educational journey. You can always make the decision to go back to traditional school, charter school, private school, whatever the case may be. So just keep that in mind. Okay. And so these are things that I said I kind of wanted you to think about before you started the home education process. People are going to have these questions as you're just starting out. However, eventually, and this is just my opinion, but eventually, as you get more and more comfortable with the idea of homeschooling and you've kind of found your rhythm and your kid is starting to learn, in my experience, one of a few things is going to happen. So you are probably going to build a new support system, right? Once you start homeschooling, if you join a co-op, if you're around other homeschoolers, meetups, that kind of thing, you are going to start to hang around with like-minded people, people who believe or have the same educational philosophy that you have, people who believe in what you're doing because they're doing it themselves. Once you find those people, the naysayers, their opinions are not going to matter, right? Because you don't feel the need to even entertain that, because you have these people who are doing what you're doing, are, just as passionate about the process or the, just the possibilities as you are. And that's going to be your support system. Those are going to be the people whose, thoughts and opinions outweigh those naysayers, right? You'll have other people in your corner. That may happen, or something else may happen. And this, has happened to me. Those naysayers that were questioning your decision, who were asking, are you sure this is something that you want to do? Are you qualified to do this? Those people are probably going to start to come around and become your supporters once they see how successful homeschooling is, how much your student has learned, how much your student has grown. And they're not really going to have the ability to give negative opinions, because there's not going to be anything negative for them to say. And so I have experienced both of these where, I've found through co-ops and meetups and, other groups of homeschooling parents and families, I have found that support there. But I have also found support in people who initially questioned my decision, but then came around because my daughter was progressing better than they even expected her to. So, like I said, even though you're going to start off with probably initially having to field these comments and these questions from people who don't support your decision, or who are, questioning what you're doing and why, you'll start there, but then you'll have a support system, or those people will come around, or you're just not going to care because you're going to be too busy with homeschooling to worry about what other people are saying. So this wraps up my series on the 5 steps to creating your home education program. As I previously mentioned, if you missed any of those other videos, we had one about basically the enrollment process, one about curriculum. We talked about co-ops. We talked about all kinds of things. If you've missed any of those videos, please go back and watch, just to make sure that you have everything that you need to establish a successful home education program. Hopefully, I will see you in the next video, and happy homeschooling.